We're live.
We're live. Excellent day. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us at this virtual Macomb meeting. Second to last of the year, because, of course, in December we have our annual banquet. So I am still your president, Diane Hall, and I'm going to pass things over to our roving treasurer, Adrian Bradley, fresh off the Okotek Star Party, for In the News in the Sky.
All right. Well, I told myself I'd be ready to present when you did that, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to share my screen. And before I do that, I need to move this out of the way. Here. All right. So hopefully everyone can see my screen okay.
We can.
All right. So, couple of items I picked for in the news. This one I felt was pretty important. You see in the slide, Professor Brian Schmidt, who won the 2011 Nobel laureate for physics, addressed Space Business Forum in Dubai. I fell about $5 short of being able to afford that. Never mind, maybe 5 million short of that. But he writes interesting, the pale blue dot that we live in is not infinite, it is finite, and it's the only thing in the solar system that we're going to easily be able to live. And it continues on here. So we need to make sure that we use what we have well, and that means making sure that every citizen of planet Earth has the education they deserve. And what a great place to start with astronomy, with space, and with physics. This is near and dear to us because we help in that education. The article, which I've cited here, goes on to talk about how from cave drawings and human history, astronomy was a big part of what was taught to the masses, and we can play a role in that. We go from cave paintings where we show what we see, and now we go to astrophotography. We were talking about Doug Bach, who's here. I know Bill. I don't know if Bill has come. We can take pictures of comets in the night sky directly, as well as all other night sky objects, and use those as education. They don't have to just be pretty pictures that we share. There can be pretty pictures that we use to teach. So for those of us, whether we're professional or amateur, we play a huge role in, especially in these times when flat earthers have made a comeback. We've got political issues. We've got illnesses, vaccines, and discussions around that. One thing that's been constant through all of this is space educations. People have been willing to look up, and once they see it for themselves, either with the naked eye, they tend to believe what you tell them about the night sky. Also in the news, we have the dog bone asteroid Cleopatra. This was interesting to me because in looking up news articles from the astronomy magazine online, and I saw this, I tried to go back and I couldn't find the article. But so I took pictures, or I took the snapshot and a couple paragraphs from it. So basically, it's a newly obtained images that were taken a couple of years ago, and then this article came out a day ago. Here's the 3D model of the dog bone asteroid, aka Cleopatra. Interesting fact about Cleopatra is that it has two moons, real small moons, both named for the historical figure Cleopatra's real children. The names that I have forgotten, but they are in this link, which I know I said I couldn't find the article, and I copied down the link myself so I could always go back so you can go back using this link. So those were the two stories I found for in the news. And here's my quick, in the night sky, we were at full moon. tonight is a 98% full moon. And Uranus is, if you see the field of view here, copied from Stellarium, just over 3 degrees. I would estimate this at just under 3 degrees, Uranus and the moon in conjunction. So it makes a great target and a challenging target for astrophotography. For visual, makes it very easy to try and hunt down Uranus because it is so close to the moon. Even with a bright moon by, it's a challenge to try and see that. However, we have other challenges here in our skies because this is tonight's forecast. Right about now, this is what's happening with cloud cover over Michigan. David, you may not have this issue, so you may be able to go and observe after our meeting. But here in Michigan, if you live in this area, this is what the moon is going to look like for you. Something more like this with lots of clouds. So if there's something to see tonight, if the clouds break up, go out and see if you can observe this conjunction of Uranus and the moon. Recent article on the pronouncing of Uranus. We all know the public will say Uranus or Uranus. And as it turns out, there are scientists that are concerned about missions to Uranus because of the butt jokes. When you put it in public, we're going to go to Uranus. They're reading, you're going to go to Uranus. They giggle and laugh, and there's a perception issue with it that says, well, if you want to go to a nice giant, you got to go to Neptune instead. So the article goes on to state that there is a way to bridge the gap between doing real science on Uranus and handling all of the butt jokes that come along with it, finding a way to use it to spark interest in the public, to say, well, the planet Uranus is a really cool place to go, and that there's a lot of science that can be learned from it. So there's, I see Bob has posted in the chat how to properly pronounce Uranus. You can
I think
say,
they should go back to. I think they should go back to George.
yeah, that would be a good idea. I think I should do a little more work to find out why Uranus was chosen. I think it's related to Saturn.
Uranus. Uranus was a Greek name. It's the only one of the planets that's Greek.
That's
and
Greek,
it's
isn't it?
Oera, actually, Uranus, Uranus.
Okay.
And it's the only planet other than the Earth that is not named after a Roman god. It is the god of the heavens in Greek mythology, and that's what it is. And it's actually
But King George wanted it named after him.
I get that. That's what
Yeah.
what they did originally.
So it was
yeah.
Planet
George's
I
star.
remember. Yep,
George's
I remember
star.
that.
Yeah.
Actually, Herschel was the one that wanted it named after.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
George.
The grand tradition of Galileo and his Medicean stars.
Right.
All right.
Anyway.
Thank you, Adrian. We had the news a little bit short tonight because we are expecting a wealth of observing reports, and we wanted time for everybody, especially y'all coming back from Okie-Tax, to get to share with us the way that Adrian is sharing a gorgeous star-strewn picture right now. All right,
Yes.
so
All right, let me stop sharing the screen. It does get cloudy at Okie-Tex, but that's not the moon. It's the Milky Way shining through, if you
that's
may
incredible.
recognize it. So with that, take it away.
All right, so presidential report. End of the year, we've got 2 virtual Cranbrook meetings, 1 virtual McComb meeting, and our virtual annual banquet remaining to us. Next month, or rather a week and a half from now, we are having elections. We have officers term limited out. We have officers stepping back for personal reasons. If you are interested in joining the fabulous board of this august society, please email Dr. Dale Parton, our first VP. Get your name on the ballot. We will be conducting the elections online, which is a little awkward at times, but we do what we got to do. And if you have any questions about any of the offices, please email any of the board members or the board members collectively to find out what's what. And this is a great time also to check with our treasurer to make sure your dues are up to date, because only active members can run and only active members can vote. So to participate in the democracy of the Warren Astronomical Society, check with Adrian to make sure your dues are paid up. If they are, you'll be able to renew in January like everybody else. If they're not, I recommend hitting Adrian up by PayPal real soon.
PayPal preferred.
Yeah, PayPal preferred. Second, we have the awards are going to be distributed as per usual at the virtual banquet. The board has several fine submissions for well-deserved recipients of our service awards, but as this is another weird year where we weren't physically in the same space, seeing one another physically at events, hanging out together, seeing the work behind the scenes at something like Astronomy at the Beach. If you have nominations for people who are going above and beyond to serve the cause of astronomical education in the context of the W.A.S, let us know so that we can recognize these great people in front of their peers. Third, as far as returning to physical space, as you may be aware, we are on the cusp of getting the Pfizer vaccine approved for kids under the age of 12, which was a major concern for board members because, of course, a huge part of our outreach is to children, especially scout groups. We are doing, as Riyadh will go into details, a phase-in cautiously of an in-person event for the open houses. We have informed Cranbrook of our meeting dates, and we have the go ahead to come back under certain conditions, which we may be able to meet. The board will definitely be taking that up in the near future. Basically, we would have to cap it off at 50. Cranbrook, we can generally do that. So it seems like under current conditions, we'll be doing open houses, Cranbrook meetings, and then we're waiting to see how to make a Macomb meeting feasible with the space we've got. So I would expect to be, if current conditions continue and there's not like another Delta variant sort of spike, anticipate returning to person in Cranbrook sometime in the first quarter of next year. Okay. With that, I'd like to pass things over to First Vice President Dale Parton.
Thank you, Diane. At our next meeting on November the 1st, Bob Berta will give a presentation on solar astronomy. We will not have a short presentation at that meeting because we'll be having the election. A month from now, on November 18, John Panuto and Tom Krosky will give a presentation on selecting targets for this season's viewing or imaging. Sounds pretty interesting. A lot of us tend to look at the same things a little too repetitively, so maybe we'll get some good ideas for other things to look at. And I'll finish by saying I always am looking for more speakers. So if you're interested in volunteering, please let me know. And Diane, back to you.
All right, thank you, Dale. And of course, Dr. Dale Parton is one of the fine officers who's hanging up his hat at the end of this term after long, long service to the W.A.S. So we are looking for, and hopefully we'll have, some fine replacement selected at the next meeting. Bob's cat, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, on to Riyadh Mahdi, our observatory chair.
Thank you, Diane. Hello, everyone. As Diane mentioned, we're going to start going back to in-person observing. We have decided at the last board meeting to do that in a cautious ways. by means of still wearing the masks. If you're coming out to the observing session this coming Saturday, October 23rd, staying outside is okay without a mask. However, if you're going to get anywhere near other observers, we ask you that you put your mask on. Also, in terms of observing through the telescope, if it's going to be clear, of course, we'll have the building open, we'll have the dome open. However, what we would like to do is not let more than one person or one family at a time inside the observatory, just to kind of stay safe. If you're not vaccinated or any children that may be coming with you, we ask that then you please have your mask on and have the kids also have their mask on. So we would like to see how this will work out, and if everything goes well, then I think the future open houses are going to be in person. So please help us out, make this work out for everyone, for everybody's safety, and hopefully we'll be back together soon, starting this coming Saturday. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Riyadh. And of course, we're already getting scout groups emailing us wanting to know if they can join in the fun. So people are ready and raring to get back to observing. So as Riyadh said, we're taking it slow, but we're hoping for a good night for this one. Let's pass things over to Secretary Mark Kedzier.
Hi, everyone. I have two. I should give this to Bob T. This is outreach, but November 10th at the Warren Civic Center Library, we're doing the NASA My Library grant. We're working with 5 to 12-year-olds and hopefully do some observing through a telescope safely. And on November 11th, we'll be launching the Library Telescope program at the Ferndale Library. And that's all I have to report.
Short and sweet. Thank you, Mark. Okay, Adrian at Treasury. What's the good word?
All right, back at you again, holding multiple hats. This will be another quick Treasury report. I will simply tell you all what we have in the kitty. $21,236.04 in our main checking account. $3,263.95 in the GLAC account. And PayPal, we thank all of you that have been using PayPal over the last couple of months. We're back up to $937.10 in digital fluid cash there using PayPal. With in-person events returning, we do have a an app and a way to take donations using a credit card with with a dongle, and I have an old style Apple iPad that it'll work with. So as we get closer to figuring out getting back together, we will be able to take donations in person, but also the PO box is still there. I am hoping to go a lot more often than I have. I haven't gone as often as I would like, but I will be paying a visit definitely before our next meeting in December. So that is it for the Treasury Report.
Thank you, Adrian. And on to Bob Tremblay at Outreach.
Well, Mark already gave his report, which kind of makes me happy. I have another report here from Dale Parton. Would you like to say what you did there, Dale?
Well, on Monday, we were contacted, the Warren board was contacted, I think over a month ago, by a group of homeschoolers in Oakland County, asking if somebody could come and show them the stars and so forth. So I did that on Monday. We had 12 or 14 people. And it went quite well. I think hardly any of them had ever seen the sky through a telescope before. While I'm at it, I'm also going to be speaking at the Roseville Public Library on October 27th on the topic Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. So a couple of outreach events.
I spoke before. I spoke to the radio station 97.1 yesterday to several of their reporters about the supposed bolide that came by. And it wasn't a bolide, but the fact of the matter is I explained how meteors are meteoroids in space, meteors in the atmosphere, and meteorites when it hits the ground, and explained what a bolide was and how there's 42 meteor showers a year. Just a few of them are major, and that these supposedly this one would have come out of the Uranids, which is the dust and accumulation that Halley's Comet produced, and that we turn into it, and so on and so forth. And I was on for about 5 minutes, and they were very interested in it. But then, of course, we found out that that supposed bolide was actually a Russian missile. We should have probably figured that out because of the speed of that particular thing coming in. A meteor.
Yeah, I noticed it going a bit slow, and it was definitely breaking apart like crazy.
That's right. But again, a bolide, doesn't go slow. It zips across the sky because it's usually moving substantially faster than something re-entering from orbit. And I didn't mention that because we didn't know about that yet. But
if anybody here does not know what we're talking about, a couple days ago there was a
2 nights ago.
A meteor something burning up in the sky event,
right.
And it was unknown what it was for a while. It turned out to be a Russian something or other. I'll post something when I'm done.
Cosmos
talking here.
2551.
Yeah. And so that was I reached out. The public heard that, and I got a couple of calls from friends that said, I heard you on the radio. Well, big deal. But I said that was at least it got a chance for people to kind of understand what in fact a meteor is and such, and they had no clue. The two talk Anderson or whatever, it was completely at sea. They had no idea at all.
So you also did your Wednesday thing on Facebook,
I did it on,
did you not?
This week. Last week I did Bellatrix and Safe. So I kind of completed. No, 3 weeks ago I did that, and then I did Mesa, which is the head of Orion, this last week, and then this week I did it on Castor, not Castor. I'm sorry, on Capella,
You know what? So Ken and Dale, I'm going to want to get something from you so I can put it in my outreach report.
Yes.
For next month.
Yeah.
So
And Bob,
adventures, send it to Bob.
Yeah, I explore scientific star parties, which of course both David and I are doing. We once again we did it this past Tuesday.
Yeah, we got to keep doing that, no question.
Yeah,
like
I'll send it out to you.
You guys make my job easy. Jeez, oh
yeah,
Pete.
It's fun to do.
I've been roped in, so every Tuesday night I'm a part of it, sharing images. So
yeah,
plenty of places, plenty of outreach being done by the club.
Yeah, I'm gonna want from all you guys. I'm gonna want to get a little wordage.
I'll get a report from you.
Cool.
And just to note, Bob is being term limited out by our Constitution after 3 very interesting years as our outreach chair. So again, big shoes to fill in at the next meeting.
That's pretty much it for me. I have something for observing reports, kinda. It's outreach. It's outreach I've done. My wife and I are doing this after school club, and the last thing I wrote for the Vatican Observatory Foundation blog post is that no schedule survives contact with the students because one student knows more than everybody else, obviously, and a lot of them haven't looked through a telescope, and I'm trying to teach the basics, and they're asking questions, and I'm going off in tangents left and right, but it's very interesting, and it's this year's been a lot more rewarding than the last couple of years because I'm pounding the basics in, and everybody's just like all the time, so that's good.
Hey, Bob,
Yes.
could you mention about you were contacted by a reporter from the Warren Weekly? You want to say something about that?
Actually, I did I get back to that person? I responded to them, and I don't think they ever got back to me to talk about that.
Response, but let's save that one for later, since that's a behind the scenes kind of dealy. Anything else, Bob?
No, that's it for me.
Awesome.
That's
and
enough.
Dale Teamy at Publications.
Well, the WASP is online, of course, for October. The November issue is coming along, filling up pretty nicely. There are contributions to the calendar for this year, or for next year, I should say, the 2022 calendar. And boys can use some more pictures, make the job of selecting harder for the committee. And preliminary work on the annual mailing is underway, and that's coming along fairly well as well. So things are chugging along really well. And that's Publications for you. Back to you, Diane.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Okay, subgroups in brief. Solar Mart is not with us tonight, but he and I talked about the sun last night. I've posted a link to the SOHO telescope's sunspot, so you can see the sun is active. We actually had some activity over the previous weekend that resulted in a really good display of northern lights in many areas, including around the Great Lakes. As far as double stars go, Riyadh, what's on the agenda for the open house if the skies are clear?
Yeah, well, I'm going to have my list of double stars for this time of the year, and we're going to go through it, and hopefully we'll be able to see a few gems.
Excellent. And off to astrophotography. What are y'all up to?
So Doug, I don't know if Bill Beers isn't here. I say we let Doug talk about Okie-Tex.
You ready for that?
Let's do that for the observing report, since some
Okay,
of that was
so-
visual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Astrophotography specifically, what you got?
So if there's any, well, Bill's been kind of busy all summer, so I don't know what he has planned, but if you folks have any questions about astrophotography, I happen to have a YouTube video about 18 minutes long on basic astrophotography processing on my YouTube channel. I put together last July, so that might be useful to you.
Can you post that link in chat?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, I did that a while ago. So that's all I would have. It's if there's questions that I can answer, I will do so.
I guess I'll add, if there's any interest in nightscapes and night photography, is sort of an offshoot of astrophotography. It depends on what your aim is in what you're trying to shoot in the night sky. Is there any interest in also having some sort of write-up about doing night photography? Classic astrophotography gets into deep sky objects and getting the most out of getting started with that. Usually Earth is not in the picture. Earth's in the picture with nightscapes and night photography. So if wanted, I can throw a blurb up about that.
Go for it.
Okay, I'll work on something that I can add. It's kind of as part of the astrophotography group. I thought there was a third. There's a third one that the RASC you can certify in deep sky, you can certify in wide field and night images, and then there's a third one that you can do. I'd have to look it up.
Just one other thought is that there's a astrophotography group that gets together. I think it's the first Tuesday of every month at the Plymouth Library.
Yeah, and we're back to meeting in person, I believe. I've been meaning to get to one of those.
Yeah, it's a hybrid. It's both in person, and they'll have a WebEx set up so you could join in via WebEx if you want.
And there are some top astrophotographers in the group: Doug Struble, Jason Gunzel, Doug Bach here, Auni Hafida, who I think has come and done a presentation for the Warren Astronomical Society, and then Gordon Hansen. Gordon Hansen's kind of our fearless leader, right, Doug?
Yeah, he's the one who opens up the WebEx, so he's managing the WebEx meetings.
Yeah, been plenty of others who do some pretty fantastic astrophotography work.
So can I ask a question with that stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So, first meeting, I was involved with you guys years ago with our Boy Scout group. I had borrowed some of your 10-inch Dobbs and did some astrophotography with an old Meade LPI at that point. Kind of got out of it. I was a assistant scoutmaster. So, want to get back into this. I'm kind of working remote as IT director for a company. So have time on my hands again and getting back into it. So I just picked up a Celestron 130 SLT with, oops, sorry about that. A Celestron Next Image 10 megapixel viewer camera. So I sent Adrian a couple of sample photos that I've got of Jupiter and Saturn. So, I mean, are you considering something like that with an imager part of the astrophotography, or are you strictly considering using camera?
Planetary, that was the third one I was looking for. Planetary is absolutely a part of astrophotography.
Okay. So, again, I don't know
yeah,
how the formats work, but want to get more involved with, the Warren Astronomical Group, and, was active with scouting and youth groups, and been to your, Walcott Mill a number of times with scouts through the years. So, really appreciate all the effort you guys have done, and want to help out wherever I can. So you need help either with your outreach programs or scouting or IT type technology stuff. Definitely going to be more involved. And, if any guys want to see some of the stuff that I've done with so far, primarily Saturn and Jupiter. I was actually up at the cottage, got up here this afternoon and figured I'd do some deer hunting, and of course raining all day, but now I see Venus out there and Saturn and Jupiter. It's like, shoot, do I get the telescope out or do I join the meeting? But I could do that later in the week. So sorry to take up some time here.
It's
No,
okay.
thanks for coming back to us. And hopefully we'll be able to do a lending library at a Stargate again very soon and
I see
get
some
more
familiar
telescopes in
faces.
the hands of more people.
Yeah, you guys were meeting, at Cranbrook and the college back then even. So I know I went to a number of meetings and was active, but looks like some of you guys are still here.
Yeah, we've got a few people who've been around for a couple of decades or more.
So
Very good.
yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
History group, any adventures not otherwise featured in the newsletter?
No, we're still on hiatus with me playing around so much with the calendar and
Yep.
other stuff. Yeah, life has gotten a little busy for me here.
Indeed.
Plus, working a lot with some graphical work too. I'm learning a couple programs right now, so it's kind of taking up my time.
Oh boy.
I keep looking at that stack of or those tubs of old materials sitting there thinking, I really should dust off the scanner again.
And
that could happen one of these days.
if y'all haven't checked out the back issues of the Detroit Astronomical Society's newsletter that we've managed to save and Dale has uploaded, do check that out because it's fascinating stuff. All right, I think that concludes our special interest group. So now let's be officially on to observing reports. Hey, Bob. Okay, Bob's uploading the full Monty of solar views with a close-up of that nice fried egg sunspot. All right, friends, start raising your hands to get your observing reports in. I see. Okay, there's Adrian. There's David. How about Mr. Levy can go first.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let's let my good friend David go.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Adrian. And I just wanted to make a brief report. There are the big, huge sunspot on the sun has left the sun, but there is another one that's just come on a few days ago. And it's kind of just hanging in there. Last night was the maximum of the great Orion meteor shower, and I went out to a sky that looked bright as day, and I still was able to see 2 faint meteors over an hour and 45 minutes of observing.
Can you hear him, everybody?
I had to turn up the volume.
I can't
Okay,
get him
sorry
at
about
all.
that.
Yeah, I
Right
am
now.
here. I'm hearing him. It is a little soft, David, but I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to try to get closer to the microphone. For my quotation that I'd like to share with you is in honor of Carolyn Shoemaker, who passed away in August. And I miss her very, very much. To say that she was a good friend goes beyond is a real understatement. It was very much more than that. Our collaboration was really very special. Her husband, Gene, some of his remains are resting on the moon right now with the following quotation. And I would like to do that now. I'd like to do that now
Yes,
in
please.
honor of Carolyn. From Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. Come, gentle knight, come, loving, black-browed knight, give me my Romeo, and when he shall die, take him and cut him in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That is a true one of Shakespeare's most beautiful passages for my tastes. All right, Adrian, Doug, let's go. Let's have Doug go first, since he's got seniority in the club.
All right.
Good evening, folks. First, I'd like to mention something that came to my attention 2 days ago. I got a call yesterday from a Mrs. Murphy, whose husband passed away a few days ago from COVID. He lived in Irons, Michigan, not far from Boone, and was one of my dear friends up there. Whenever I went up there, he would come over and we'd chat about astronomy. And in the next week here, she's going to send me some pictures of some of his equipment. She would like to sell it. I know he has a Celestron 11 and a Celestron mount that may be up for sale. So just a heads up, that'll be coming out in a news flash or whatever whenever I get that information. Astrophotography. My observing report for this month is kind of mundane, but I guess I'll go through it anyways. All right, let's share here. Okay, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so October 1st through the 9th was the Okie-Tex Star Party. And Roger Tanner and I hooked up on the 29th and started heading out that way to Oklahoma. Took us 2 days to get to the state park nearby. And then that morning we pulled into the park and got set up. And our setup ended up being kind of like this. This is the RV we stayed in while we were down there, and his scope's here and mine is here. And just to show you what it looked like uncovered, he brought a whole new system that he purchased, and he had built this mounting system for another scope, but he just basically bought a Ioptron mount and a 10-inch f3.9 astrograph and some cameras, etc. This is all new stuff that he put together explicitly for this star party. And I brought my G11 mount and a newly acquired used refractor that I did all my astrophotography with. And let's see here, which is shown as this setup here. So this is what I use for the photos I'm going to be showing you here in a few minutes, or in the next minute or so. I had a new 2600 MC camera as my main camera, and then I have my guide cameras in 071. And there's Roger getting ready for that night imaging session that one night. He's all smiles because things are working. And then this was one of the earlier ones. I was on the 7th, actually, the later ones that I took of the Orion area with the Horsehead Nebula IC 434, which is there, and then the Flame Nebula.
Wow.
And this is approximately 6 hours of data. Wait, 3. No, I'm sorry, for about 3.5 hours of data
Wow.
with
Beautiful.
this 4-inch that I have. Yeah, that turned out really nice. This is a shot of M33 Triangulum Galaxy. Again, this is 3 hours, a little over 3 hours of data. And then this is the first time I've actually taken a shot of the Pleiades with any scope, because it takes a lot of data to get and dark skies actually to get all this nebulosity that you see in here. And this one was quite long, 200 well, basically about 8 hours of data, I think.
I can't say I've ever seen the grayish stuff over on the right.
Yeah, it's there. That's the less illuminated nebula that's the stars aren't getting to. You see it, but it's actually dark nebula that's not being illuminated. That's all it is there.
How did you keep the blue giant stars from absolutely wiping out the image?
This has a really deep well depth on this camera, and these are 1 and 2 minute exposures that I took. So they're not getting blown out as much as you might expect with 1 minute exposures. But when you stack 224 of them, it brings out the nebulosity that's around the edges. Yeah, I took actually short, 1 and 2 minute exposures as opposed to my normal 5 minute exposures that I would take. And lots of neat little details in the streaks and stuff like that. This is like I said, it's really the first time I've ever worked on the Pleiades with any scope, and I was really pleased with how that came out.
It's beautiful.
And then I some of you guys know that I go after comets, and I also go after galaxy clusters. Well, I says, okay, Perseus A galaxy cluster is up. Let me shoot it with this 4-inch. It's got a wider field than my 10-inch, and let's see what it looks like. So this is all the NGC galaxies that are in that field of view. And this is what that field of view looks like without it being identified, right? And you think most of those are stars. However, I was gonna show you something unique. If you set up the image solver and the annotation that goes with it, you end up getting something rather interesting. Let's see if I've got it here. Yeah. Go over here.
Wasn't that the first image you showed just before this one?
No, there's yet another one to show you. Okay, so there's where you just identify all the NGCs. But if you turn on the PGC catalog, those are all galaxies that are in the blue.
Wow.
So all the red and blue are galaxies in this cluster.
And obviously moving away from us, huh?
So another object that fits nicely in this 4-inch is the Eastern Veil Nebula. In my 10-inch, I had to get this. I had to do a 3-panel mosaic with my 10-inch to do this, but with this 4, it gets it nicely framed. This is 5 hours worth of data. Almost 5 hours, excuse me, of data on this one. And then I did the Iris Nebula, which is in Cepheus.
Oh yeah, that's gorgeous. I don't know that I've ever seen all that dark nebulosity around it in a photo before.
And this one is actually one that I tamed the nebulosity.
So how many images is that? And is that still a 1 minute exposure?
Those are no, these are 5-minute exposures, and this
Okay.
is 113 5-minute exposures. So all night long, like 9 hours and something. This is when you push the data even further. Okay.
Yikes.
That's all real. It's all there. It's just most of the time we don't process it quite that.
Talk about your interstellar medium.
Yep. That's all that flux in there. So there's this one's a little less pushed. Get a little more detail down in the core of the nebula itself. So that was a really interesting result. And then I did the helix, and this time with this scope and those skies, I actually got this outer shell as well, which I've never got before because the helix is pretty
I've
lovely.
never seen that either.
That's with your 4-inch?
Yeah.
Oh,
And that's 54.
Portal 1 dark skies, everybody.
Oh, kidding.
Yeah. Dark skies get you opportunities that you wouldn't have in my backyard, for example. And that's 54 by 5-minute subs. So about 4.5 hours.
Yeah, I don't think I'd get that with my Celestron.
In fact, there's a little bit over here too. So that's my observing report. And again, there's my scope that I used.
That sounds like one heck of a trip, Doug.
Oh, it was awesome. It was clear. We were there 7 nights. It was clear about 5.5 of those 7 nights. The first night was cloudy when we first got there.
I actually brought my Celestron to Arizona. We went to Sedona for a week a few weeks ago, and I couldn't get any good images. I mean, even of just Saturn or Jupiter to save my soul. I mean, it was just terrible conditions. So that was beautiful. Thank you.
All right, Adrian, what's your take on the Okotex?
Oh, let me, I'll share my screen. So
I forgot. Adrian, excuse me. I did forget one thing.
Yeah.
What's
I
that?
did look through some telescopes. They weren't mine. It was OPT, other people's telescopes.
Oh, I
Until
wish you hadn't said that, Doug. We were going to give you an armchair, rather computer chair observing award. Now we have to retract that.
I
well.
worked very hard to never get that armchair astronomer award, and you know why? I was the one that came up with that award, and I gave it to Dave Harrington the first year.
Yikes.
So
Okay.
I'm actually showing. Well, go ahead, keep going, Doug. You're showing the 70th Global Star Party, which David and I will be at. I'll be RSVPing to be in that. Feel free to attend if you all would like. Carry on.
What I was going to say is that I did do a little observing. The sky was awesome. Saw a lot of fairly bright meteors while I was down there. And I did do some observing, but I did go to bed early compared to everybody else because I know that I can start my system up and not even worry about it. It'll be parked in the morning at dawn and I'll just download my data. So the automation I put together 4 years ago has been working just wonderful. All right, Adrian, I'll shut up now.
That's all right. Wow. Yep. So this is that cloudy night that Doug Bach talked about. Notice Milky Way here. This is most of my shots were 30 seconds or 8 seconds. When you have a dark sky, there a lot more data comes down really quickly. The Milky Way, this is the one thing that's hard to convey, and I tried to do it with some of my images, how bright the Milky Way is at a Portal 1 dark site. It just shows up, and when you can take snapshots of it. Let's see. That is an iPhone picture of the Milky Way. That is my iPhone 12 Pro with a 30-second image on one of my tracking mounts aimed at the Milky Way, and it got something. I don't know that you can do this in our skies, even in the UP. It's something I would have to try doing and seeing what I would get. Now, this was my deepest shot prior to going out to Okotex, about a minute's worth at a Portal 4 park, and somewhere in here, I think I have a minute's worth of data at Orbital 2, which we have in the UP. So this is 30 seconds panorama at Okie-Tex. These are stitched together. Each of these are 30 seconds. And I think I eclipsed the data. Now I did cheat a little bit because I'm using a modified Canon 6D. So a lot more data can come through in the 30 seconds. Couple of memories of being there. This is one of them. And I didn't realize I'd done this till I'd already been back from Okie-Tex. There's a cat's paw in the Squid Nebula. These aren't nebulas we normally see in Michigan. And they showed up in the in my image, this pano image here, along with these 4 stars of the Stinger. Now at Lake Hudson, I've thought that I've seen these stars, so I'm curious to see if I can actually image the cat's paw there. But it appears just readily. And then of course, this part of the Milky Way disappears pretty quickly this time of year. So that's this I don't recall. I do believe this is an 8-second shot. And that's how much detail I'm able to get in 8 seconds. Here are some more 8-second shots. Notice the clouds are dark. In a Bortle 1 sky, there's no light pollution illuminating the undersides of clouds. So at night they are simply all dark. And if you're observing, you're looking at the night sky, patches of it just disappear if there are clouds. Here, the other side of the Milky Way with a modified camera. Here's Orion rising. Here's the mesa I'm facing east in my hiding spot and shooting directly at this region of the Milky Way, which you don't see very often. There's the California, there's the Pleiades. There's a little bit of a dark region around it, which is a void that really exists. The Hyades are here, and various nebulae being shown in Orion's region, the molecular cloud. All of that shows up. This I believe was 30 seconds on a tracker. I tried my hand at some star trails, a couple of meteors, planes, anything that streaks across the sky ended up in this image, which I believe is a composite of 4 different 15-minute images that I tried to take. And yet the Milky Way is right here. It shows up. The other side, well, here's a good, this is, once again, from camp. You saw this mesa in one of Doug's pictures. I'm hiding back here. You see all these red lights as well. Now, the longer exposure sort of makes those lights look a little brighter than they actually were, but there were a lot of red lights in camp. Let's see, a couple more before I'll turn it back over. Until now, this was my best picture of the zodiacal light. This is back home in Michigan a few months ago. And that's the Milky Way, and there's Orion. So you've got this little X right here. Nice lake, Lake Huron, Port Crescent, Dark Sky Preserve, and that state park there. Well, in Okie-Tex, I woke up at 5 in the morning and saw this. There's the pre-dawn zodiacal light. There's the winter Milky Way going all the way to the horizon. And because I shot this with an H alpha modded camera, you've got detail around Orion.
You're submitting that one for the calendar, right?
Yes. Here's our camp, and the Cygnus region. I used a non-modded camera for some shots too. That's one of them from the Cygnus region. I think this you may see this picture again fairly soon. Still get a lot of detail even with a non-modded camera. Now you go, well, look, I see this oranges and this greenish hue. Not light pollution, you got air glow. And the difference being, as opposed to, let's say, if it's light pollution, data disappears here and everything gets washed out, as opposed to data going all the way to the horizon. Where is this? You still lose some data, but you also, as you can tell, it's still, there's still data here.
Yeah, it could also have been partial haze out there.
Yeah,
we had a little bit of haze each night from time to time as well.
we did. Yeah, this is a pretty deep photo. If I zoom in, you're seeing some nebulosity here. There's
That
double cluster,
Andromeda there up there. Yeah.
Andromeda, M33, NGC 752, I believe. And let's see, couple more.
Yeah, we do need to take a little break before main presentation to give everybody
Yeah.
do a bio break.
Right. And man, there's so many to pick from. So my last shot will be this one. Crescent rising moon through the zodiacal light. I did
Okay.
not capture that as well as I wanted to, but it was absolutely a beautiful sight. And said, if I could take everybody with me to see some of the things that I saw naked eye, I absolutely would have. Somewhere in here, I have a picture of the heart and soul and the double cluster, but it escapes me. So that one I'll just have to post and send it to I'll probably send it to Dale Teamy.
Send it to the calendar committee, aka
Yep.
Teamy.
Would you like to see a minute and a half time lapse?
Yeah.
Let's do that during the break. Let's just give everybody the chance to go do a bio break for 10 minutes. Why don't you run it now for those of us who are not doing the bio break? Because I would like to see that. Back in 10 minutes, y'all.
Oh, let me stop sharing so you can take it, Doug.
Ta-da!
What was the music you were using for that, Doug?
It's called oh, let's see here.
Well, our bottom line is if you can go to the star party, definitely go.
Agents take revenge. Agents take revenge. That's what it's called.
That's very nice. So how long did it take for y'all to drive there?
24 hours.
Doug did it in 24 hours. I was with Jim Forster from the Lowbrows, and we took our time. So it was, we started the week before. So
Okay.
maybe,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Well, it was for us. It was 24 hours of driving, but we took 2 days to get within striking distance, and then 3 days to get back. But it was still about 24 hours of driving with about 2 or 3 hours of stops, gas, and food, and all that kind of stuff.
That's about what I expected. Okay. So, a big to do for those of us who have kind of limited vacation, but doable. Awesome. All right. See y'all at 8:35.
Okay.
All right, Doug, it's time for you to have a laugh at what a nightscape photographer tries to do classic astro. There's the heart and the soul. I think this is 1 minute. Heart and the soul in a double cluster.
Oh, that looks fine.
Yep, that popped up.
Fairly wide field.
Yeah, I'm looking at wide field imaging.
Yeah.
There's trying to shoot Orion. I stacked maybe 60 or so frames, lots of haze, and Orion is rising through the air glow. And that's the best I could do based on that. I purposely rose the intensity, carefully brought up the intensity of the witch head to have that show a little better. And yeah, everything is blown out, but Barnard's Loop, Lambda Orionis, aka the Afro, the Rosette showed up pretty decently here. And
I got to shoot the Rosette with my 4-inch.
yeah, I'll bet you get some really good shots.
Because my 10-inch is just too small of a field of view.
Yep. That was the Dipper. Didn't give the Dipper much love.
My wife said I could get this one, my horse head, on a metal print. I might try doing that. It'll be the first time I've done a print of any of my fast photography.
It might. I'm curious to see how it's going to turn out. So
what was the southernmost object you were able to see there?
oh, the cat's paw for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did also visually observe Sculptor Galaxy.
Yeah.
And
I didn't go. I only went. I think the most southerly I worked down was the Helix, which is, again, it's up 6 degrees more than it is here, so it was
yeah,
could
so
have run a little bit
really
longer on
good.
it.
What's the latitude there where you were?
36,
Okay.
36 or 37,
Yeah.
something like that.
Okay.
Another iPhone photo. Terribly noisy, but getting the Milky Way at all is something you usually don't do when you're shooting at it with an iPhone. And but out there, you can get it as much as you want. Somewhere in here is my panorama attempt, Doug.
And what
Here
app
it
are you
is.
using on the iPhone? That's not the stock camera.
This is the stock camera here.
Really? Oh,
The
for the panel. Yeah.
panorama.
How are you getting
Yeah.
a second shot on the camera for the iPhone?
Night mode on the iPhone and aiming it directly at the sky, it somehow knew to image for 30 seconds.
Wow. I'll
It
try
would
that.
show you 10, but then when you started the image, it would start off on a 30-second countdown, which it's like, I'm glad it detected that.
I'll have to try that because I've got the 12 Pro Max.
Yeah, I have the 12 Pro. So yeah, it should work the same way. Now I'm curious to see what you'll get in our skies here. Portal 1, I think these shots were maybe they're 30 seconds each, and there's like 6 or 7 of them in this panorama.
Nice.
Facing north or northish.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jonathan.
Okay. sound clear enough to listen to for an hour?
Yep, it is.
And with that, 1 minute warning, gang. Back to your seats. Mute buttons on. Cameras on or off is your preference, but I'm about to turn things over to Dr. Dale Parton for our introduction of a familiar face at the virtual podium.
You ready?
All right, 8:34. Dale, take it away.
Wow, a familiar face indeed. Tonight, our presentation is going to be given by Jonathan Kade. He's been around for quite a while. Been a member of the Warren Club since 2007, and has at various times been our secretary, our treasurer, publications chairman, first vice president, and president. 5 of the 7 offices that we have. And most of those, all but one, he was in those offices for 2 years. So we really have been well served by Jonathan. He's been very active in outreach and also instrumental in bringing us up to speed with doing online meetings. When COVID hit, where would we be without being able to do this? So tonight, he's going to be speaking to us on a topic that's especially tailored for newbies. It's buying your first telescope. And again, please everyone mute your microphone. Jonathan, take it away.
All righty. So how does this look squashed?
It looks elongated, but we can
Let's see
read
what I
it.
can-
The graphic looks fine. It looks like a letterbox.
That should be
Yeah, it looks
fine,
fine.
as long
It
as it
looks
doesn't
fine
look
to me.
squished.
Yeah, the graphics are not squashed.
Okay, let me know. Let me know if it starts looking squashy. All right, so this presentation I was asked to give by Dale to sort of get people up to speed on things you should think about as you consider buying your first telescope. And I want to say first and foremost that I might try to talk you out of buying a telescope if you're kind of new at this. So be prepared for that. But what I wanted to start with, because I thought it might be interesting, and also because it allows me to talk about me, which of course everyone wants to hear, is how I bought my first telescope. So my family bought a cottage up in Black River, which is that heart up there, sort of. Can you see my mouse? Oops. Let me.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can circle that. So my family bought a cottage up there, I think when I was about 6, and so we started going up there at every opportunity. And as you may know, if you've been up there, I know Adrian does a lot of imaging inland from there, but that is one of the darkest sky areas in the Lower Peninsula. And back then, it was even darker. So here's where it is now. So my my family's cottage. Is the text squashed? It looks like the text is squashed, but I don't know.
It's fine. We're good.
But this is where this is where our beach is. I mean, we're not on the beach, but we're across the street from the beach. So we have that little gap in the lights, which is pretty cool. It the local light pollution very much depends on whether or not my neighbors are up there and have their lights on at the time. So you know, as you might expect, I saw some really amazing dark skies, but I didn't have a telescope. So one of my favorite pastimes when I was a kid was reading the Edmund Scientific Catalog. This is a little bit before my time, but it gives you the general idea. And I'm sure many other people on the meeting tonight remember these wonderful catalogs as well. They're just stuffed full of everything. But the thing that captured my heart from the first time I saw it was that red ball there, the Edmund Astroscan. And I wanted that telescope so badly. It was on my Christmas list and birthday list from the time that I was about 8 to the time that I was about 13. And so one I don't remember when, but finally I got some optics. A pair of Tasco binoculars. I never did get the Astroscan. One of these days I'm going to pick one up. And I used them a lot. I use them a great deal. I still keep my childhood pair on my desk at work, actually, when I'm on the occasions when I'm back in the office. And they're pretty decent I mean, those are the days when Tasco was pretty good. And they're decent for astronomy. It has enough focus travel that I can focus on the stars with it. But I just, for some reason, when I was a kid, the idea of using binoculars to look at the stars or to look at the sky and see other things that weren't necessarily just stars just didn't occur to me. So I had binoculars I used all the time. I spent a lot of time, me and my siblings would play hide and go seek, etc., out in the yard after dark. And there were plenty of opportunities to see the sky. And I just never really did. I never really got to know the sky on a close personal basis the way certain other people did. And so I read tremendously about astronomy. I read the Isaac Asimov home astronomy library, cover to cover every book, and all these other astronomy books. I read every astronomy book in the kids section of my library when I was in elementary school, and then a bunch of the adult books as well. So I kind of got busy during high school, having 4 hours of homework every night. Didn't leave me a whole lot of extra time for anything else. And the first half of college, I didn't really do too much to rekindle that flame. But then something happened. I met a girl, and her name was Diane, and we got along pretty well. And I went out to visit her in California, this is, you can tell from how blurry this is, how old this photo is. But she taught me all of the stars that I know, and taught me how to identify planets. And that was really the first time that I got to know the sky and understand, how to tell a planet from a star, what were the giveaways that you were looking at a planet, where you could expect the planets to be. And, we got along pretty well. And around the same time in early 2002, just before Diane moved out here, we also had a tremendous astronomical event. We had all of the planets lined up on the horizon at sunset for about a week, I think. And I was going to Lawrence Tech at the time, and my professor, Michael Narlock, also ran the astronomy department at Cranbrook, as he still does. And he gave us extra credit if we went out to Cranbrook for their events, astronomical events in general, but also for this event specifically. And so that is how I first met the Warren Astronomical Society, because the Warren Astronomical Society, I don't know who all was out there. If you were out there, please say something in the chat. I know Larry Kalinowski was out there. That was when I met Larry. And so it seemed like a cool group of people, and their telescopes were amazing. And I got to look at I think Mercury was out of telescopic reach, but everything else I got to see, and that was really cool. So that, you know, that started me towards this club, and it also got me thinking about the possibility of actually having a telescope. So things continued to go pretty well with Diane, and we got married in 2004, and more importantly, we also got a pair of Celestron Skymaster 15x70 binoculars, and even though they're kind of large, they're large aperture, they are very light and easy to handhold compared to any other binoculars in this size class. And we used them extensively at Point Pelee National Park, the closest national park to Detroit, to look at butterflies and birds. And we also started using them to look at the sky. And around the same time, I started, using my Tascos a lot more to look at the sky as well. And we got to the point where we were living in Detroit at the time, and it was a great time for astronomers to live in Detroit because we didn't have any street lights. And so the light pollution in Detroit in 2006 was a lot better than the light pollution anywhere else I've ever lived. So eventually some of my neighbors got security lights because we didn't have any street lights. And the way we solved that problem was by climbing out of the back window of the upstairs onto the roof of the back porch. And we would be observing for 3 and 4 hours on a 15-foot tall roof that we could have easily fallen off of at any time. So thank goodness we didn't. But we did a lot of great observing up there with binoculars. And one day in 2006 or 2005, we were over for a barbecue at my parents' house, and my dad had picked up a few issues of Astronomy magazine from the newsstand, and I started browsing through them, and I started seeing ads for all these telescopes, and I started seeing prices. And at that time, we were living with my grandmother, so we didn't have any rent. Diane was paying for all of the house's bills with her salary, and I was spending 100% of my paycheck each month on my student loans because I wanted them to be gone. And so as soon as those were paid off in 2006, I told myself I was buying it as a present for me and my dad, and I bought a SkyQuest XT-8 8-inch reflector. And so that was my first telescope. And we got it for Christmas of 2006, for Christmas of 2005 going into 2006. And I took it up to the family cottage up in Black River, and I left it up there. I think we left it up there for like the first 6 months or something. And then as we don't use it as a 4-season place, although we're trying to change that now. As the year was getting towards the time that we locked up the cottage, we were like, we can't leave that thing up there. And so we brought it down, and all through that winter, I was out there on the on the back patio of my grandmother's house, looking at the approximately 15 degrees of clear sky I had, and seeing whatever I could see in it. I also wanted to call out the person who gave me this catalog, or one very much like it, was Harold from the Ford Amateur Astronomy Club. He used to set up right in front of the Dearborn Public Library, Centennial Library, and then in front of the police station, and show people the sky. And he would also hand out Orion catalogs, or whatever catalogs he had. And so So it's ultimately his fault that we ended up with an Orion. And so Orion really owes him, because I I bought a lot from them since then. But that is how I bought my first telescope. We took it up. The first time we used it was in March of 2006, I think. We brought it up when the snow was still on the ground. There were about 3 feet of snow on the property. We couldn't even get in the driveway, so we just parked on the street and glumped through the 3 feet of snow to the house. I think all I did was unlock the house, turn on the pump and the water heater, and then go outside and shovel a place to set up the telescope. And then we set up the telescope, and we were out for like 3 hours using it. And the first thing we looked at was the trapezium in the Orion Nebula. And there was a tremendous feeling of accomplishment that I was able to set up a telescope and find something in it, even if it was literally the brightest nebula in the sky. And of course, we also saw Saturn, which was very well positioned at that particular time of night. It's kind of getting back to where it was. I think next year it'll kind of be at the same phase, the same angle that it was then. So, with the rings splayed out kind of like this, and it was, the usual kind of gee whiz. Even though Jupiter's my favorite planet, you can't deny the amazing experience of seeing Saturn through a telescope for the first time, or through your telescope for the first time. But the thing that super excited me more than anything else was after we exhausted, we went through all of the objects that we knew existed and looked at them. And once we had run through that list of about 6 things that were, certain interesting stars and not too much else, I just started panning the telescope around the sky looking for interesting things. And I hit this amazing galaxy that looked like a paisley shape. And that is the galaxy M106. So I hit it with the telescope, and then I looked at where the red dot finder was in the sky, and I pulled out some star charts, and I started trying to figure out what thing I could be looking at. And I figured out that was M106. So even though M106 isn't the most glorious Messier galaxy, it'll always have a special place in my heart because it's the first one that I found by myself without having anybody point me to it. It was an experience. It was out over Lake Huron. It was a beautiful, clear night. Nobody had lights on that night, and that's the kind of experience that makes you do this for a very long time. And I do have to say, that was our first telescope, but it wasn't our last telescope. So we picked up a few more over the years. That wooden telescope we got off Craigslist for, I think, $25. We had to drive up to White Lake to get it. The guy had like a 747 cockpit mock-up in his garage and a bunch of other crazy stuff. He was a teacher who made a bunch of equipment for pedagogical purposes, and including telescopes of this nature. And so one of my proudest astronomical moments was setting up that telescope, which doesn't have it. It is strictly a friction focuser. It doesn't have a focuser. To focus it, you move the eyepiece in the tube and out of the tube. And if you so much as breathe on the eyepiece, it shifts either forward or back in the tube. And so it's very difficult to maintain focus, and it's very difficult to do outreach with it. It is a really wonderful mirror. Whoever ground it did a wonderful job. I believe somebody ground the mirror for him, but it's a beautifully made piece of equipment. All it really needs is a modern focuser to be a little bit more useful. And The 10-inch telescope, the other SkyQuest is an IntelliScope, and I got that from a Warren Astronomical Society member that you all know, who decided to focus on reflectors, or on refractors rather. And then the giant telescope there is the John Cosland 22 and 24 inch, and that is the most recent addition to the stable. We got that from John's estate last year because it had to go in order for his house to be sold. So, and that that telescope that trailer in the garage behind it is how you move that telescope around. It is not a telescope you pack up in your car and drive around, although it does collapse surprisingly small. So anyway, so if you don't have a telescope and you want to get involved in observing, the most important thing is yourself. If you just learn the sky, if you just learn how to identify planets and some bright stars, it gives you so much more power to be able to figure out the rough spots that always happen with telescopes. A lot of people think that they can get a smart telescope that has a computer on it, and they're going to have a great time and be looking at Hubble photos through the eyepiece. And that's just not how it works. You can spend $5,000 on your first telescope, and if you're not approaching it with the right frame of mind, you're probably not going to get that much out of it. And it's going to sit in the corner, and then you're going to sell it for about half what you paid for it. And it's not a good thing to do. Now, if you're on this call, if you're spending an hour with us this evening, you are probably not one of the people who's going to do this. I think you probably have more interest than the people who buy telescopes, don't use them, and then sell them cheap online, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, because those people are your friend if you're looking for a telescope. But it is a tragedy, and it always kills me to see people selling barely used telescopes. So don't do that. But when you want to observe, whether you're just using your naked eye, whether you're using binoculars, or whether you're using a telescope, you have to be aware of yourself and your body in order to get the most out of visual observing. So the first rule is you have to be comfortable. If you are in a crazy position looking through the eyepiece, or in a crazy position craning your neck and your arm holding binoculars, you're gonna hurt in the morning, and eventually, it's not the best way to spend your time. So try to be aware of ergonomics. It's something, I speaking as somebody who finds myself half hanging off a ladder looking through an eyepiece 10 feet above the ground because I don't listen to this advice very well, but I try to be aware of my posture and my ergonomics and take care of myself. The most important thing for getting the most out of your eyeballs is to relax. Like if you're trying to strain to see, it actually makes it harder for your eyes to see. If you're squinting so that you can look with one eye through the eyepiece, that the eye that you're using to look through the eyepiece is going to start to close too. So you want to keep everything as relaxed as possible. You want to leave both of your eyes open. Ideally, cover the eye you're not using with your hand, or get an eye patch. And plus, that makes you look cool like a pirate. But that way, your eyes can both stay open, and both of your eyes can be relaxed, and you'll get the best experience out of it. And sort of related to hanging off ladders 10 feet above the ground, especially when you're not used to looking, if you're not used to looking through an eyepiece, one of the hardest things to learn is the visual axis of your eyeball needs to be aligned perfectly with the visual axis of the telescope. And so if you're moving your head around a lot, that's not going to happen. Like you notice it if you've ever tried to take if you've ever tried to take a photo of the moon or of Jupiter or something with a cell phone through a telescope eyepiece. A lot of members of the general public do that when they come out to lunar eclipses and such, and you'll see you just tend to move your hands kind of move even if you have steady hands, and the thing will go out of the eyepiece. And if you've seen videos of birds keeping their heads perfectly still while their bodies blow around in the wind, that's kind of what you have to do when you're using a telescope. And it's very much a learned skill. It's not something that comes naturally to almost anybody. So the more steady you can be, the more steady you can keep the telescope. Not holding on to the actual telescope tube is super important, because if you're holding on to the telescope tube, your hands are going to move around a little bit, but also your heartbeat is going to push the tube around and cause distortions when you're trying to look through it. So ideally, you want to have your eye to the eyepiece, but not be touching the telescope in any way with anything. And the very most important thing for seeing dim things and getting the most out of objects like galaxies and nebulas is don't rush it. If you have your cell phone out and you're checking your cell phone every 5 minutes, it's not going to go well. Your eye has two different kinds of cells in the retina. And I know, you've all heard this, but you have rod cells and cone cells. And the rod cells see in black and white. They don't have color. And they see in dim light very well. And they detect motion very well. The cone cells see color, but they're very slow, and they see motion. They don't see motion very well, and they don't see in the dark well at all. And the worst part of it is that the cone cells take precedence in the way your brain puts together the signals from your eyeballs into a picture. So if your cone cells are controlling what images your brain is putting together, you're not going to see faint galaxies. You're not going to see detail in the Whirlpool galaxy. You're not going to see the tremendous detail that is there in the Andromeda galaxy if you give yourself some time. You're not going to see the detail in the Triangulum galaxy, and you're not even going to get what you could get out of looking at things like the surface of Saturn, the surface of Jupiter. Anytime there's faint details, anytime that there's subtle gradations in color and brightness, all of that stuff is going to be, your cone cells are going to take over and reduce your ability to see the sort of dynamic changes. And so in order to start shutting down your cone cells, you have to be in the dark. And when you're in the dark, a chemical builds up inside your eyeball called rhodopsin, or visual purple. And what that does is it tells the cone cells, hey, it's dark. You need to turn off so that I can see in the dark. And if you just let that happen, it's like magic. I can walk down to the park at the end of my street up north when the moon isn't out, when nobody has their lights on, and see perfectly fine just by the light of Jupiter. If you give yourself the opportunity to use your visual purple, you're going to have a much better time than if you are looking at your bright cell phone every 5 minutes, or if you're going inside, or if you have a light on nearby. So try your best to keep all of the white light gone, all of the blue light gone. If you have to use a light, use a red light. But that is the biggest thing in terms of getting to use whatever optics you're using, whether it's just your eyes, whether it's a pair of binoculars, or whether it's a telescope. You got to give your eye at least a half an hour of true darkness in order to see the most possible in the dark. So the next most important thing is the sky. You hear people talk about transparency a lot, and transparency comes in different categories. Sometimes there's clouds, but there's also mist. And as Adrian pointed out earlier in the context of the Okie text, if you're in a true dark sky area, even if there are clouds, the clouds aren't going to be lit up on the bottom, so they're not going to hide the sky from you. So if you have thin clouds in true dark skies, you can actually very frequently see things right through them. But if you're in a light polluted area and the bottom of those clouds is illuminated by light from the ground, you're not going to see anything. And that's what happens to us down here a lot. So it's amazing how often supposedly cloudy skies where you can tell that there's some clouds there, you can still get a lot of astronomy done. So light pollution contributes to transparency problems. Even if the light pollution isn't lighting up clouds, it's still going to light up particulate matter in the sky. It's still going to ruin the skies for you. Of course, when there are clouds or when there's a lot of moisture in the air, light pollution is a lot worse. And the other factor that controls how much enjoyment you can get out of the sky is what's called the seeing, and that's how stable the atmosphere is. So if there's a lot, like if the jet stream is going over through the sky above Michigan, as it frequently is in the wintertime, our seeing tends to be pretty poor in those times because it's going fast, it's very turbulent, and if you look at something that is in that at high magnification, you're going to see it waving around. It's just like looking at, above, it's like this mirage above a car on a hot summer day when the top of the car is hot and it's moving the air. It shimmers above the car, it shimmers on the road. The same thing happens in the sky, both from air moving and just from thermal effects. So you want the sky to be as still as possible. And usually high pressure systems are best for that. So sometimes people think the skies are best in the winter. They're really not. The stars are the stars that come out in the winter are the brightest. And that fools a lot of people into thinking that the skies in the winter are better. It's true there's usually less particulate matter in the winter, but usually the seeing is better in the summer and you can get more stuff done. So, the most important optic that you're going to use is your eyeball. Your eyeball has a lens in it that focuses images that come in, projects them on your retina, and believe it or not, everything that hits your retina is actually upside down. It's your brain that flips it right side up. So it's kind of a strange thing to think about. The most basic equipment that you can start with is binoculars. They're cheap. They're good for a bunch of different things, unlike astronomical telescopes, which flip everything upside down or sometimes upside down and backwards. Binoculars show you right side up images. You can use them for looking at ships. You can use them for looking at birds. You can use them for looking at butterflies, any number of things, as well as looking at stars. The biggest danger that you have with binoculars is that if your eyes are bad like mine, I have some pairs of binoculars that will not travel out far enough to focus the stars. I can still use those binoculars for birding, but I can't use them for astronomy. But really, I got good at finding stuff in the sky by using binoculars. I would, I remember the winter of 2004, 2005, I was going out with binoculars every clear night, and I just practiced over and over again at finding the Beehive Nebula right in the middle of Cancer the crab. And I would just stand there and look at the sky and practice quick drawing binoculars and making sure that if I brought my binoculars up to my eyes when I was looking at the right place in the sky, I would see that star cluster there. And that was, it's still one of my favorite star clusters, but beyond that, it was just really good practice for being able to kind of keep the geometry of where things are in the sky set in my head. And I still use that for finding stuff in the telescope all the time. So the most common telescope that everyone thinks of when they think of a telescope is the refracting telescope, where you have a lens at the front. It is long and skinny and narrow, and you have a lens at the back that focuses that beam into your eyeball. And, you know, Galileo did not invent it, but Galileo is was the first to publish observations taken with it. An Englishman actually beat him to doing observations, but if you don't publish, it doesn't count. The reflecting telescope was invented by a Scotsman named James Gregory, who had a habit of inventing tremendous things and then putting them as bonus problems in his math textbooks and not ever doing anything with them. And that's what he did with the reflecting telescope as well. Isaac Newton, who was a contemporary of him but was slower than, who was behind him on the draw, designed this after Gregory had designed his own, but Newton actually built two of them. So again, it doesn't matter what you do if you don't actually follow through on it. And this you may recognize as the logo of the Warren Astronomical Society. For reasons, I think we determined that we chose the logo because it was cool. So it's a piece of societal history for you. And finally, and more modern design-wise, is the Catadioptric Telescope. And these come in a number of different designs. There's the Maxitov Cassegrain Telescope, which this is the diagram of, that has a corrector plate and a flat secondary mirror that bounces the light into your eyeball. There is the Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope that has a, well, excuse me, this is actually, I got this from the Celestron website and I just realized the diagram is wrong. A Maxitov doesn't have a flat secondary mirror. It uses the inside of the corrector plate as a secondary, and it's actually curved. So as far as I know, this is actually wrong, but that is what a Schmidt-Cassegrain is. It has a flat secondary mirror in the eyepiece, and you can see in the Celestron Next Star here, there's that plastic insert, and that is there to hold on to that secondary mirror. So these are extremely popular. They're really useful in that they collapse down into a small size, and that you know, you can, if you took this telescope, so it's called catadioptric, it's called a folded optic telescope, because as you can see, we're having the light move a lot more in the tube than it normally does in a reflector or a refractor. With a refractor, it's going one way, it's going all the way down, and it's, you know, there's no kind of funny reflections going on. In a reflector, it comes straight in, hits a mirror that focuses it, hits a secondary mirror that beams it out to the eyeball. And so you get, so essentially, you know, the reflector design gets you twice as much focal length as the refractor design, and the folded optic telescope gets you even more. So you can, if you know, if an 8-inch, if you had an 8-inch reflector, or an 8-inch refractor rather, it would be about 12 feet long. What is ours? Ours is like 9 feet long, and it's an extremely short 8-inch refractor. So in the dome at Stargate. So if you look at a Next Star 8-inch SCT and then go out to Stargate and look at the telescope in the dome there, you can really get a feel for how much more light travel they get with these folded optic telescopes. And of course, if you have a telescope and you don't have eyepieces, you don't have nothing. So usually telescopes come with a couple of cheap eyepieces. One of the first things you should do when you get a new telescope that comes with a 10 millimeter quote unquote Plössl that has a that has a lens that is smaller than the tip of this this marker here is you should take that eyepiece and throw it in the trash, or maybe, you know, figure out how to use it as part of a, you know, a doomsday laser. I don't know, but don't use it. Don't use it for looking at things in the sky. There are people whose pupils are designed for using that kind of eyepiece. I am not one of them. I don't think I've ever actually met somebody who enjoys using one of those. So definitely save a little bit of money when you buy a telescope for buying a really good eyepiece and not using, usually, like if it comes with a 25mm eyepiece, that's perfectly fine and you'll use it a lot. But usually the high magnification eyepiece is garbage and should be treated as such. And of course, there's also mounts. You get more, the Dobsonian mount, which is called an altitude azimuth mount, gives you the most, you can collapse it into the smallest space. It's the easiest to transport it. And it also, you know, is easy to move with your body weight. You can just kind of push it around, and, you know, sometimes it's just like dancing with it. And if you're going to use it on, if you're going to use a tripod, if you want to do astrophotography, you need an equatorial mount, because equatorial mounts are designed to follow the sky. So as the sky rotates around the North Pole, that mount is also going to allow your telescope to rotate around the North Pole. So altitude azimuth mounts, unless you have some crazy thing to rotate the eyepiece, which Optic out in Grand Rapids or in Lowell sells, you're not going to want to use an alt azimuth mount for any kind of astrophotography. All right, so I was going to pause the presentation here. I think we're running a little bit late, but I am going to draw on the whiteboard behind me, and I was going to talk about some hard choices that might happen. I don't know, you might want to set it up if you if you have it set up to show the Hollywood Squares view, you might want to make the presenter the big one or something. But basically, I wanted to draw a couple of trade-offs. So one is budget, and another one is space. And so this is space in your car and in your house. So if you don't have very much money and you don't have very much space to store a telescope, probably, you know, your best bet if you don't have much of either, is a small reflector like a Star Blast. If you have lots of money and not very much space, your best bet is probably a high-end Cassegrain. Like, what are they called? What are the ones with the fancy star map on the back?
Astroscan or Questar?
Questar, yeah.
Questar.
So like if you have a lot of money and no space, a Questar is probably, depending on how much of your money you want to spend on the telescope, that might be a good option for you. If you have a little more space and you have a little bit more money, you know, a good medium-sized SCT might be a good option, or a medium-sized or a good medium-sized Dob. If you have lots of space and lots of money, then go for a refractor. Go for a big refractor, like the one that Riyadh used to have. And so these are sort of the trade-offs you have to make when you're looking into buying a telescope. You have to ask yourself, do I have a trailer that I'm going to tow my 24-inch telescope in? Do I have a garage that I can store that trailer in? Do I, you know, am I going to be storing my 10-inch in telescope out in the garage where maybe it's the moisture level is too high for it? And you also have to consider how easy is it going to be for you to carry a telescope. If you find it difficult to carry 50 pounds at a time, the larger, you probably can get by with a medium-sized STT, maybe a 6-inch. But as you go to, I guess 8-inch is pretty manageable, but as you go to 10-inch and above, the amount of glass increases exponentially. And so it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Like, Doug, how heavy are your big SCTs?
My 10-inch RC is 35 pounds just for the OTA.
Okay, well, that's not too bad.
Yeah, but the 12-inch is 54 pounds.
Okay, yeah, and so that and at 12 inches they're pretty gigantic too. So it can be pretty heart-stopping to be holding that much money in and that much weight. And unlike with a Dob, you have to lift up that SCT to get it onto the mount as well. So it's definitely something to consider. So if you can't carry as much, you want to stay sort of on the smaller side of things as much as possible. So another another couple of axes that we could think about. Sorry for the ripping noise. Another I need to use these up before the pandemic ends. So is your patience level and what you want to see. Probably have written that bigger. So if you're very patient, one of the problems that I have with Cassegrain telescopes is that I'm not super patient. Cassegrain telescopes, folded optic telescopes, tend to have the longest. You have to let them sit and achieve the ambient temperature for longest, because otherwise you get a lot of condensation on the front corrector plate, and you get a lot of tube currents. So if you're a little bit less patient, reflectors are pretty good. Although I probably drew that in the wrong, what do you want to see? And so if you want to see, if you want to see planets, and you're impatient, refractors are your bag. Because refractors, you don't really, because they're sealed, you don't have to worry about them reaching thermal equilibrium nearly as much. And because the optic path is just straight down the tube, there's nothing funny going on with it. It has a lot less to go wrong than other types of telescopes do. So if you want to see, say, bright objects like M42 and the Andromeda Nebula, that's where you get into sort of reflectors. You have to give them a decent amount of time. I try to give them as much time as possible. You can also get fans on the primary mirror for reflector telescopes, and that speeds the process up considerably. But with Cassegrains, I think you can put fans on them, but it's not as simple as just gluing a fan to the back of the primary mirror. Is it? Anybody with more SCT experience want to weigh in on that one? And then if you want to, if you want to see the really faint stuff, one thing about Cassegrains is that they tend to have, unless you're operating a super fast one for photography purposes, they tend to have much longer focal ratios than reflectors do. So if you want to see a big object visually, usually reflectors are going to be your best bet because they tend to have the lowest focal ratios of any of these telescopes, and it tends to be most economical to get a big primary mirror that collects a lot of light and allows you to collect all of those amazing photons that are coming from distant galaxies. So those were my whiteboard charts. Probably should think of some other ones. So now you've decided, you've gone through all of the different trade-offs about what kind of telescope you want to buy, and now you want to know where to buy them. So I would say the first place you should look is just read the WASP every month. Oftentimes, and not just the WASP, but the star stuff from the Ford Club. What is the Lowbrows magazine called, Adrian?
Reflections.
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 So just keep up with all of the club's newsletters and look for sales there, because oftentimes not only do you get good deals oftentimes, but also you might be able to ask for some tech support from the person who sold it to you. So that's not to be underrated. One of my favorite places to pick up any kind of astronomical equipment is at swap meets. Those are typically, where you get the best deals, and also you can get rid of your own stuff that you decided wasn't really a great fit for you as well.
Just make sure you get there before Clay gets there, or Norb. They buy all the good stuff right away.
So I will say, if you think that you're going to sell stuff and break even, my track record is not good. So don't go in thinking that you're going to necessarily break even, but at least you'll get better deals than if you bought it new. Going further afield, if both of those are striking out, I would definitely recommend checking out Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and sort of the sort of general purpose garage sale type environments. Now, looking at the selection of telescopes shown here, and of course, Adrian pointed out estate sales, like unfortunately Doug's friend who passed away from COVID. Unfortunately, we've had way too many estate sales over the last 2 or 3 years, and especially if you knew the person. I do have a lot of astronomical equipment that I got from people who have passed away, and I think when I use it, I think of them. So it is a good way to remember them, but it's certainly not something we don't want any more deals of that nature. But if they do come along, do check them out, because sometimes you'll get the best deals at those, but you may feel bad about them. But as you can see from the selection of equipment on Facebook Marketplace, some of it is just outright garbage, like the Cassini telescope, the National Geographic telescope. Not something you want to spend money on. But then there's this StarSense 114 millimeter reflector. That's a Celestron product that you can actually attach your cell phone to. I'm kind of tempted to try that out just to see what that StarSense stuff is all about. The Meade LX50, to me that seems, I don't know how many extras there are, to me that seems like an ambitious price to ask. So you definitely have to, you have to take all of these with a grain of salt. And always online, if something seems too good to be true, be very careful about pursuing it, because it probably is. Another place to check out is Astromart. One drawback to Astromart is that it is paid. You have to actually subscribe to it in order to use it. So it tends to get, the people on it are very serious people. You don't get ripped off on Astromart very often. But it also costs, I think, $30 a year. And you know, it a lot of people don't want to pay money for anything these days. So I don't know. But they do have a lot of good stuff on them. You can see how many different Catadioptric telescopes there are, how many refractors. Not so many reflectors, oddly enough. And of course, you can go directly to the telescope companies. Telescope.com is Orion. Orion sued Meade into non-existence and then bought them out of bankruptcy. OPT, Oceanside Photo and Telescope, is a really awesome company as well. And there's a lot of other awesome companies. Of course, you can always go to Amazon or Costco and eBay. There are good telescopes on any of them. There are a lot more bad telescopes on any of them. So, as always, be careful. If you're considering buying a telescope and you don't know if it's a good fit for you, feel free to email the club, and lots of people are very happy to give you advice about whether or not something's a good deal. In the last few minutes, I think I'm going to go for another 5 minutes because I think we started a bit late. I did want to go through some notable telescopes at different price ranges. This one is a great one for kids, the Celestron First Scope. It comes with a 4mm eyepiece that you can immediately throw in the garbage. The 20mm eyepiece is pretty good. It's very low focal ratio, so you're not going to see any detail on Jupiter. You're going to have to squint to see the rings of Saturn with this telescope. But it's great for looking at the Orion Nebula. It's great for looking at star clusters. And because it's such a fast focal ratio, you can actually fit in some of the big star clusters and some of the big galaxies like Andromeda, or I haven't seen the Triangulum we own one. I haven't seen the Triangulum Galaxy in one of these, but I believe that, you can almost see the Triangulum Galaxy naked eye. So if you're in dark enough skies, you could probably see it. Moving a step up, both in price and in aperture, it's double the price and more than double the aperture. And this is, if you're looking for a scope for kids and you don't want to spend more than $129, this is a really good choice. My favorite small beginner telescope is the Orion Star Blast. This was actually the third telescope that we bought, the second brand new telescope that we bought. The mount so there's both a version with a Dobsonian mount and a tripod mount, same telescope. We got the one with this mount. This is a really maddening mount. I have since put this on an EQ2 mount, and the EQ2 mount, the problem with these cheap equatorial, what are called EQ1 is like equatorial 1. What happens is they have limited travel. So what will happen is you'll be tracking an object and then you'll hit the stop, and then the telescope stops dead and it can't go any further. And what you have to do at that point is you have to back it all the way up, take the lock off, turn the telescope manually, lock it back in, and then find the object again, which is now super lost because you just spent 2 minutes setting that mount. So I would say if you can avoid using one of these EQ1 mounts, please avoid it, because it's having used one for 2.5 years before giving up on it, it's definitely more hassle than it's worth. But the scope itself is really great, and if you can get it on a better mount, I highly recommend it. Or if you just get it in the strangely enough, the version that comes in the Dob costs $10 more. But it's definitely a much more usable mount, and I would highly recommend this one if you can afford that. Moving up another step, so now we're about doubling the price again. 6-inch is where you really start to be able to see faint galaxies in true dark skies. You're not going to see them super well, but you're going to see them decently. You might be able to see the basic whirlpool shape, even though you're not going to see much detail in the whirlpool galaxy. you're going to be able to see some of the brighter nebulas in the arms of the Triangulum galaxy. And so if you're mostly interested in seeing brighter things and you have access to dark skies, 6 inch is a good size. And I have to say, I updated the prices on this from the last time I did one of these, and holy cow, the prices on anything 6 inches and up, like 6-inch telescopes are $100 more expensive than they were a year and a half ago, but 8-inch plus are like $200 more expensive. And sometimes some of them on the Orion website are twice as expensive as they were 3 years ago. So I don't know, like I definitely would be looking for used telescopes in that case. So the Starblast 6 is a little bit cheaper than the XT6. This is like it's still a 6-inch telescope. It's faster than the full-sized XT6, which means that you're going to get less magnification. So it's not as good for looking at Saturn at high magnification, but it does give you, it's called rich field because it gives you a big chunk of the sky. And if you're just panning around on a summer night up north where it's dark, you're really going to have a good time with this style of scope. I just talked about the smaller model of this on Facebook Marketplace there. These StarSense telescopes from Celestron, they have a mounting clip for your phone, and there's an app you download to your phone, and it uses your phone as a push to basically. Now, you may remember I said you don't want to be looking at a bright phone while you're using your telescope. So I'm pretty skeptical of these. I have not gotten to use them yet. I don't know if there's like a red light mode on the app. I do want to try it out and see how it works. I will say that my friend who bought one of these was never figured out completely how to make it work and ended up he stopped asking me astronomy questions about 6 months ago, so I have to think it's probably in his closet somewhere. So I don't like that outcome.
I actually have that with
but-
my my 130 SLT. I've got the wireless module and have used the Skyport app, and it actually works pretty well. It's got a night mode, so it's a red screen, so it's not too bad.
Okay. What module? What wireless module?
It's the Celestron Skyport Wi-Fi module that plugs into the 130 SLT.
Okay, well that's so they use StarSense on a couple of different things. So one of them is a camera that attaches to the telescope, and that's not so bad. But this one actually uses the camera from the cell phone instead of that, and it points at a mirror, so you can kind of see that weird plastic doohickey. All that ultimately is a mirror with a dew shield. So I don't know if that's the same thing you have, but I'd like to try one of those and see how it works. I'm getting told that I need to speed it up. Next star, this is not, even though this looks like it might be a catadioptric. Oh, this one is a Maxitov. I didn't see the silvered area, but this is the smallest Maxitov they have. This one is $100 more than it was 3 years ago. The XT-8, my first telescope, I paid $270 for this. Granted, that was a long time ago, but that's a pretty steep price jump. But I still love this telescope. I would try to get it used. Now, when you start adding electronics and have built-in finding, this has the Starblast 6i has a built-in push to. So what that means is that the computer hand that in telescope paddle will tell you where to push the telescope around, and it'll help you find stuff. I figure I spend enough of my day on computers and I want to find stuff myself, but I am in the minority in that regard. The Meade ETX90, super popular telescope. This has a bunch of different accessories with it. but the price is a lot larger than the aperture, is my feeling about it. And then you start to get into the Schmidt-Cassegrain designs, and the prices go up even more. But this is a very classic telescope for very good reason. This is the evolution of one of the most popular telescopes of all time, and it is a very nice telescope. The XT-8i, that's another push to. XT10 Plus, I was blown away by this. This has no electronics. It just has slightly nicer hardware with a Crayford focuser and such, and they're charging $1,000 for it, and I just couldn't believe that, because it's just a telescope. It doesn't have any electronics or anything. I don't know. Anyway, so now go buy a telescope, or maybe binoculars, or maybe just a tank of gas to take you up north and see things that you can't see from down here. So good luck and clear skies. And I'm happy to take questions even if we're over time. And definitely ask other people too, because other people know a lot more about certain telescope types than I do.
All right. Do we have questions? See Doug clapping there. Riyadh, very nice. Questions.
Oh, well done
Is anybody on
presentation.
the YouTube?
I have a comment.
Nothing on YouTube.
Aw.
I have a comment.
You covered everything, Jonathan. That's why nobody's asking you any questions. You had nothing to answer. You answered everything. Great job.
All right, Dr. Dale and his comment.
Okay. You know, the thing to do if you're new at all of this is don't buy one of these telescopes. Not right away.
Come out to an open house.
Come to the open house this Saturday. If other clubs like the Seven Ponds Club or whatever have some observing, go look through stuff. And also, if you are a member of the Warren Club or you join the Warren Club, we do have some telescopes that I believe we can loan to you.
I don't know if that program has restarted. I used to talk about that in a related presentation to this, but I know we had paused that for COVID, and I don't know if we have resumed that yet.
Well, here's Riyadh. Riyadh, what's the status of that?
Yeah, it's kind of mostly on hold. Recently, I had one gentleman, one new member that wanted to borrow one of our scopes, and I met with him there. But to be honest with you, it's again, because of COVID, we got to be careful a little bit. So we'll see if if there is an interest. Yeah, I'm willing to meet with somebody out there and let them have one of the scopes if there's one that's available. We just gotta still be a little cautious. That's all.
But the message
Okay.
is the inventory is existing for
Yeah.
members to use. That's the
Correct.
message.
Correct.
So-
Now, not everything that we have, not all the scopes that we have are loanable. Some of them
Understood.
just basically stay in the observatory, on the observatory ground, so they can be used by members, can be taken out of the shed and used and then put back in. However, we do have a list of other scopes that are there to be checked out, and they are available. We have a number of them.
The
Okay.
key element here is any club that you would go to, including the Warren Club, go to their open houses or beginner nights, etc., before you start hunting for a telescope that are pretty expensive right now, with supply and demand being what it is. And if you go to the club things that are clear nights, they have scopes that they'll bring that they'll let you look through, etc., and you ask lots of questions in real time. That's really the best way to go.
Another possibility is, I don't know if Mark Kedzier is still on, but he's been assisting various libraries to get telescopes to loan out, and they're a type that Jonathan showed, and they're fairly nice for getting started. I know we actually bought one of those telescopes for the Ray Township Library. And last time I was over there, they said they're loaning it out for a week at a time. And it just gets you started a little bit, you know? So you have some feel for what you're doing before you buy something.
Yep.
And you don't have to live in Ray Township to borrow their telescope. You might have to live in Macomb County or something like that. I'm not sure. And there are a few other libraries that have more of those telescopes that Mark has. Mark, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. I know the Grosse Pointe Library, they have 8 telescopes, but you need to have, I don't know if you have to be a resident of Grosse Pointe or you need to have a Grosse Pointe library card. So that's how that one goes. Ferndale, I'm not sure what their circulation policy is going to be. Chesterfield Library has 2 telescopes in their circulation, but just the general feedback from all the users of the scopes. They find it's very easy to use and for all ages once we show them how to use it and everything like that. So they're very happy with its performance and a good entry level telescope. But it's like I'm saying, the whole key on that is that they're using the telescope, learning astronomy a little bit, where to point the telescope, and then hopefully that spurs their interest in getting the scope of their dreams.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
my other comment is, I think a number of us in the club never took this advice. We went and bought a telescope. That's what I did. And it was a big one. And there was quite a learning curve to it, but I learned it. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with starting with a small telescope or even binoculars.
Or you can go old school and build yourself a telescope like I did in 1973.
Right.
Yeah, they say old school. That's when visual was more of the rage. That's what you did, and then you grinded your mirror, and that
Yeah.
was it.
Yeah, the
But
history behind that is back in the 60s and the early 70s is if you wanted to buy a telescope, you had to have some significant dollars because they were very expensive back then. There was Cave and Astrola. There was the ones you were just talking about with the map on it, the Questars, which were which were like $3,000 for a 3-inch, something ridiculous like that. So many of us, and
$1970, right? Like
yeah. And when you were my age back then, you didn't have money, so the other option was, okay, let me buy an Edmund Scientific kit for a 6 or an 8-inch mirror with all the grinding materials, etc., and you make your own mirror, and then you buy a sonotube, and then you make a plywood a mirror holder for the primary with little springs and wing nuts and bolts, and you learn to be a little more inventive when you didn't have the
yeah,
money.
I think
But
I think the big thing.
I'm not suggesting
Yeah,
people do that. I just thought you might have a little interest in what the history was back in the 50 years ago.
yeah. And now everybody's looking at astrophotography, and that's a whole different argument where now you have, instead of folks buying their own telescopes to build or buying visual scopes, you have folks that have $200 in their pocket and they want to take Hubble-like images. So that's a whole different discussion, I believe. But
I'll tell you, I had borrowed a 10-inch Dob from the club. That had to been back in the early 2000s, and used it with scouting. Absolutely loved it. Well, then I had an ETX 80 for years, and I broke a gear on it. So then it got into 3D.
Very common.
Actually reprinted the gear for the thing, so it works. But then I picked up the Celestron 130 off an auction site, got it new. It works great. But I ended up spending more for that Celestron Nexstar camera, that Next image, than I paid for the telescope. but getting some great images with that little 130. And hopefully I'd love to get back into a 10-inch plus, scope, so yeah, I'm keeping my eyes open on the whole newsletter, and, if something comes up, want to get back into some bigger imaging. So, the next image is going to come into play with my next scope down the line, but
Yeah.
it grows on you.
Just remember, when the guys who own boats tell you, boy, you spend a lot of money on your photography and your astronomy stuff, I says, so you own a boat, right?
Oh yeah.
I
That's the
guarantee
whole
you
thing.
spent 10 I guarantee you spent 10 times as much on your boat than I have my entire astronomy career.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I can attest to that in the photography, of course.
I've got
I
to pick up the
remember
boat tomorrow for
balking
driving.
at an eyepiece, Teleview eyepiece that cost $400. So what have I done since then? I've bought several lenses that are in the $700 to $1,000 category, and a couple grand on a new camera. And I look
Adrian, you
back.
actually use those things,
that's that,
unlike
I'm
that's the
shooting a
that's the
wedding Saturday with those things.
for
those
you.
but-
That's an investment. For me, that's a waste of money.
that's
Yeah.
that's what you don't learn when you buy a telescope. Which one is the next one? That's
Yeah,
what
I
is.
would say
I want a bigger one.
the
Yeah.
best,
Well,
best telescope is the one that you actually take out and use. If you have a 24-inch in the garage that you can't assemble because your shoulder's messed up, like me, I'm sort of getting back to being able to do that. But yeah, that's been a bummer.
You need to
I
keep
just
it
wanted
set
to
up
say
and have
the $3,000 and $1,970 is about $21,000 today. So
No shit.
yeah, so those Quest stars, and that's a small telescope too. So I think they
I
were
think
made out
Dave
of
Levy
gold.
has one of those Quest stars. I think he's something that I think he's got that. Whenever we see him, it's next to him, unless he's got it set up somewhere already.
and then,
Keen
and then
observer's eye too.
just a warning to all the folks there is once you've gotten through your early scopes, your midlife scopes, and your advanced scopes, then you'll be talking about, well, I need land where it's dark and I want to build an observatory.
I resemble that remark.
Well, the other
But I
thing,
still use my first telescope more than almost any other telescope, I have to say. Like
I mean, the other thing is your spouse has to be willing to put up with how much money you're going to spend
Yeah.
on this thing.
Yeah.
There you are.
hey, all I can say is she started it. So
Yeah, I'm sure.
Oh, well, in my case, the rule was, dear, I have had this hobby before I met you, and so it's not going away.
Yep.
Yeah. So
There
just
you
be
are.
careful. Be careful what you wish for. There's no shortcut to whether it's visual astro, using the telescope. That one usually leads to the other. I've actually regressed back to binoculars because I like things that are easy to carry. So some 10x50s in my camera. I actually carried out the C11 and the Losman D mount, and I swore to Doug I wouldn't say it again, but I'm going to. Fortunately, I had it because Doug brought out his gear, same mount, no
Oh, yeah, I
shaft,
forgot about that.
and I loaned my shaft to him and said, I don't
First,
want to set up that telescope anyway.
it was probably the first time where I went mobile that I had left a critical piece of equipment at home, and I was 1,300 miles away from it. When I was setting up my mount, I put the equatorial head on the G11 tripod, and I go into my truck, and I'm looking for the shaft. Where's the shaft? I called my wife, and I says, would you go out in the observatory and see if I left the counterweight shaft out there? She went out and looked. She didn't see it anywhere. It wasn't on the table. It wasn't on the floor. She didn't find it. So it's got to be in the trailer then. So I'm ripping everything apart trying to find this thing. I called her up a second. I said, would you please go out and look into this one box that's sitting on the floor there and see if it's in there? She opened it up, nothing in there. And she managed to walk over to the table, and there was this blue foam thing. She moved that, and it was underneath that.
oh no.
Yep.
I
Now
had taken
remember,
it off, put it on the table, moved some stuff around, including the foam thing, and placed it on it. And so when I did my final walk through the observatory, I says, "Yep, I got everything. There's nothing here that I needed to. I got everything right." It was underneath that foam piece, and I didn't see it.
Now, keep in mind, you saw some beautiful images taken at Okie-Tex. Here's how we made that happen. I come walking up. Doug's looking for the shaft. It's like, I can't find it. It's like, that's a G11, right? Yeah. Well, why don't you just use mine? So, but that first night before we set up, I said, I didn't want to set up that telescope anyway. We got a 17-inch from the club. So I walk over, grab the shaft from the telescope. And so my telescope, which took us all day to try and pack into the car to drive it out, ended up idle for the whole trip. But the shaft of the telescope went for a good cause.
And if he hadn't had that, I would have taken nothing. I would have gone around and looked at OPTs.
And then left on day 3.
Yeah. So no, we would have stuck around. Roger had his stuff.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
But I did take my 10-inch down there, and I never put it on the mount. I used my 4-inch the whole time. And you talked about heavy scopes. The 4-inch only weighs 18 pounds. The 10-inch weighs 34 pounds. So.
Yeah, and the mount weighs 34, 35 pounds. I thought it was 50 every time I lifted it.
It's in thirds. It's 34, 35, and 34 if you include the tripod. So it's the combined weight is over 100 pounds. But
yeah,
before you put the shaft on and before you put the counterweights on. Anyhow, that was the saving grace. Adrian had a piece of equipment I had forgotten and so that's the only reason I even got any of those images.
Yeah, so own a telescope that everyone else has, and sometimes it'll save you if you forget a piece. Someone else loans you a piece, and you can keep right on going.
That actually happens quite often. Not necessarily critical pieces like that, but when we get together at small spider parties, there's always somebody that's got something that you could use. Like, John Lyons was famous for that. I says, God, I wish I had some Velcro. And he goes, come to the hardware store. We walk over to his car and he opens up the bag and says, is this what you're looking for? He's almost always had something that you could use.
Ironically, I had Velcro. I mean, I didn't use it much, but I found in one of the bags I brought some Velcro. So yeah, there's odds and ends, different screws or whatever, and it can save your star party. 1,300 miles away, and parts are there. You don't have to try and invent something weird with weights or things like that.
Mr. Kade, I think you should buy that Quest Star. It's only $4,000.
Oh no.
It's a 3-inch, right?
I think it's 3.5 inch.
It's the 90-something millimeters.
I believe that weight in gold is actually cheaper than that.
Yeah, and actually knowing what's in the night sky does help. I think you covered that in your talk, Jonathan, a little bit. You can buy a nice big telescope and then you say, okay, what do I point it at? And then you're looking around and all you see are clouds. Or you're looking around and say, that star looks bright. I'll point there. And then you don't know how to focus your telescope first time out and you get really frustrated. That happened to me. I couldn't get the moon in focus. So I had to start all the way back from how does a focuser work? And as soon as we finally get the moon in focus, then we begin to see if we can actually see something else. And then it grows from there. So yeah, spending money on a telescope or a kit. There are some in the hobby that have the disposable income and will show up to the star party with this excellent kit, but then it takes 3 or 4 experienced astronomers to help them actually start using it.
Yeah,
so don't be like that.
That's one of the things that early in my astronomy career was I was forced to learn the sky because we didn't have that kind of technology. The best I could pull off was a asynchronous clock drive for tracking the sky, but other than that, star hopping was how you learned the sky, and We did all the Messier objects in the 70s and went on from there to NGC objects, just star hopping to find them with an 8-inch telescope.
I have another comment.
Yeah,
Yes,
one
sir.
more comment because we're closing in on 10 o'clock, gang. So let's have Dr. Dale's comment.
This is a very humble comment. Whatever telescope you get, make sure you get a moon filter,
Yeah.
or the moon will be too bright almost to look at. And then if you look at the moon and then it wipes out your night vision if it's too bright, then it's going to be a long time before you can see anything else that's not so bright. So get a moon filter. They're not expensive.
Yep. Good advice.
Or borrow one from your local club member who has about 3 of them.
Or more.
Being a guy that doesn't do learner, I don't have any of them. So
Yeah.
All right, gang. Well, that was a very nice way to address a perennial question that we get asked. Though my short answer is always just binoculars and a tank of gas.
Thank you.
thank you, Jonathan, for
I
the talk.
agree.
Yeah, Jonathan,
Yeah,
great job.
talk.
Thank you.
Yeah. We didn't have any questions because you did so good. There
You're,
you go.
you're welcome. I put a tremendous amount of time and effort.
Obviously. Good job. Good night, all.
Good
Take
night,
care.
all. See you.
Good night.
Good luck to everybody at the open house, and we'll see the rest of y'all on the first Monday in November.
Cool.
Coming out to the open house. See you guys later.
See you.
Regarding
Bye.
the open house,
Clear skies.
if the sky is marginal, how are we going to find out whether there is or isn't going to be an open house?
Well, to be honest with you, I mean, I'm going to be out there unless it's raining. So even if it's slightly cloudy or overcast, I might still go out there just in case somebody shows up. If it's
Yeah.
raining, of course, it's canceled.
Just notify Dale Teamy, and
Yeah,
we'll get
I can
a
do that.
email blast out.
Sounds
Yep.
good.
I would volunteer to do it, but we're going to be on the road on Saturday night. So
Okay.
Take care, all.
cool.
Good night.
Thanks,
Night.
y'all.
See you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.